solar radiation. Perfection received and perceived will lead to a union and ultimate exposition of the universal language that is clearly hidden and allow access to the eternal dialect of perfection.
The destination is on your right.
Substance is essential in demonstrating an illustrative description of detail that will enhance the elusive idea generated by lessons learned in childhood, moderating effect, hyphenating an extended resource, that will instinctively promote direction and control. Also resembles a composition of structure that internal efficiency of accurate prediction is the logic and ultimate information through an accordance connected to the link that binds a pre-established notion of definite mental approaches and abstract hierarchies of constant thought, perception, and essential form, finding goal-oriented, subject of the starting illusion that also allows hierarchies to renovate integrated being. step of advanced perspective will adapt a higher level of power that is in its little form concrete. The birthing process of empowerment is intricate, and that is simply the process of sowing and reaping. The programming process is essential in encoding text, allowing the content to be impartial yet having an apoplectic reflex that counteracts and creates a perfect balance. That is also based on the execution. The complex nature of perfection is infinite and must simply be accepted as a transcendent entity that is simplified to the complexity of its disposition. Once it's accepted as is, it will then reveal the very essence of its purest form and begin to reveal the details of perfect patterns and intricate figures along with the universal laws. And how it's all linked together and generated through a united and singular figure that is perpetually encountered within itself. Detail in itself is a force of understanding and discerning that evolves into an equilibrium of correspondence that creates an illusion of what's already perfect. Since perfection cannot be perfected, the choice remains absolute, making it elusive, yet genuinely liberal, and presenting an alternative that is both impartial and optional. Once power is released, the limitless potential of purity has complete authority that is subject to obedience and the discretion of sovereign principality. Regardless of motive, the law is in effect to the dichotomy between oppositions that may or may not maintain a balance, and the absolution of existence itself is designed to constantly allow essential purity to prevail against corruption. The flaw of detail is an attribute that further describes the intent of innocence or lack thereof, and intricately defined without questioning the nature of innocence. The challenge now becomes more profound while attempting to discern the connection between simplicity and complexity, and discover that these words are merely motivated by recreational purposes, furthermore illustrating the character and perfect balance of truth, that which is constant, and the evidence of truth, that which is fact.
encountered restoration as a fundamental process of remained qualities that are assertively conclusive to the ideal points that refresh elusive thoughts as being substantial. The profit that is essentially beneficial to the requisite of understanding and efficient mindset is conveniently eccentric and seemingly counteractive but ultimately conclusive. The permission that gives access to the route combines a force of ideas that internally investigate the dominant thoughts that are esoterically tangible enough to solve. Positions of advanced levels are programmed to be labeled and designated as being in context with the formal thought process. Certain programs are subject to disposal and motivated by a purpose-driven goal to magnify detail that truth represents. Acceptance is essential if complete discernment is expected, and in this acknowledged mindset exists a hierarchy of levels that are bound to thrust the thought process to a much higher level of understanding. Gradual growth implemented and excessively revealed on the basis of descriptive steps that are ordained with an element of shock value that will consistently overwhelm the factual essence of truth.
I've been bleeding down in my heart.
It's interesting. Every moment has its own designated significance. And it's so profound.
Well, just like this evening, who expected that we could have such an evening?
The elusive idea that restores acquisition.
That's right.
There's a projected assimilation of affirmative concept. It's limitless.
It's about life. How to handle life.
More often than not, the ideas that assimilate are physical conditions that erupt through a confined axis that gradually dominates by way of ownership, giving it excessive extensions and expressing innate innocence. Perfection is demonstrated by the organized pattern that enables the fundamental of existence itself to perpetually illustrate the intricate connection detailed within terrestrial realms. Perfect is and can be personified by acknowledging that which is true, and give evidential proof presenting a fact that perfect is constant, and makes it a fact that it is true. Constructive limits are bound by attained goals that are subject to historical interest that derive a focus that is mediated in the restored process of astounding thought, that in its peculiar nature merely investigates the conditions of the intellect. The mind is bound to submit to the directions of the source, and must distinguish control by allowing connection to contact instructions that are automated and must be combined to an ultimate extension. Extended power is propagated by extreme excess that constrains the lack of restraint and releases the power of essence by removing static that is caused by duality and alternate thoughts. There must be a willingness for simplified reception and a lack of attempt to recognize and instead realize the resource that is extended and perfectly orchestrated as a practical affirmation. Habitation, progressive understanding is projected. See the natural habitation, progressive understanding is projected. Progressive understanding is projected.
Try to
Constant exposition of thoughts and eccentricities will propel the endless journey of discovering depth where there is no surface and proclaim infinite resources that harness limitless conquests.
I've been bleeding down in my heart. I've been it made me Lying talking, laying talking about it. But take it how you wanna. Got nothing left. When nothing left to win. Well, I mean,
Free socks.
oh, wow,
Free socks. Free socks.
Well, nothing left to will. Well, nothing left to will. Well, nothing left to
Conclusions that erupt from assumed perceptions are incidental or effectual, but in the midst of perpetual notions are conclusive to an eternal ideal. Loss of perspective might control the assertive foundation of lenient thoughts, but a fact that it implements a standard state of mind is strictly based on fundamentals that recreate an interpretation as a constant flow of perception.
well, nothing left to will. When nothing left to will.
Free socks. Free socks.
Nothing left to will. Well, nothing left to
Truth is constant and will endlessly reinvent itself while maintaining its foundation and always preserve detail. And the fact that represents truth will always evidently reinterpret the core of its essence by innately and physically proving the constant nature of truth. The energy that supports these ideas is strictly based on active reception that must be recognized as innately essential. The technical logic of redeemed thought is basically inflicted and restored through a constant process of revolving dynamic that attributes the element of surprise. Constant thought is based on a naturally selected implication intending a purpose of completion that will further establish the principle. Details constructed by an attempt to clarify the contingent form of eccentric embodiment. A fraction of thought is efficiently produced and will evolve to a much higher level of discernment that both briefly and extensively has a potential to designate absolution. Definitive proclamations primitively interrelated with intricacy that truth can only define. The fact of life is directly connected to the source that exemplifies existence in general. The factual influence of strategic planning is demonstrated by the consistency of incorruption that only the truth can project.
Free socks.
Principal thought is effective as a natural condition, and the application of a like-manner perspective will initiate a approach to overwhelming control. impractical and samples the very nature of perfection that is automatically perpetual.
The idea is trying to explain is that there's a very profound composition that is literally extended, and through this extension there are these infinite compositions and projections of the subconscious, and what it's trying to do is explain the essential genesis of what it means. And through this structure we find the most profound and fundamentally orchestrated path by which you discover truth. I mean, these are ways by which we can understand the proposition that ultimately defines the whole success and process of what makes it eternally fundamental.
In accordance with the perpetual harmonies of the distinct assumption of detail that seems fragile but is a solid foundation of truth, the element that defies the route of illogical rationale is strictly constructed by an astounding force of fact that elevates the structure of perpetual harmony. The flow of the universe is like liquid that resonates with its host. And no matter what, where, when, why, or how, it is flexible enough to fluctuate with any given situation.
With each step, with each moment, there are these intricate and definitive ways that you can just literally discover each and every moment. It's like a design that with each step unravels itself. And as it's unraveling itself, it's designing itself at the same time, thereby defining existence constantly. Everlasting and unchanging, unbreakable, and literally complete. Within each step, it defines perfection, reveals itself.
The definition of detail is eccentrically efficient and sufficiently precise with having a definite aim to attain a goal of conduct that ultimately creates an awareness of perfection. Once the mind accepts the understanding and discerning construct, the energetic frequency will be free to transfer power through the awareness of truth. It will reject denial and humbly initiate access by blocking contamination on a consistent and perpetual basis.
If X is me and X is unknown, and X equals father, X equals mother, X equals sister, brother, kindred, friend, life, sun, car, road, trees. If X is equals to X is unknown, and X is unknown, it becomes an endless dialect. So you're ultimately just extending from an endless dialect. If X equals everything, then that makes it an endless projection. So if it's endless, it means it's everlasting, it never ends. I don't know. So every time you tap on X, or you dial X, you discover that it's endless. These complex structures are so complicated. And yet it seems so perfect. So imagine trying to define and explain existence. Or better yet, become it. Actually realize that you are the universe with a mouth and an echo, sound. Literally walking out and discovering that the universe lives in me. And if I'm X, and X equals everything, and X is also unknown, meaning the extent of its perfection, then I become that perfection. But I have to grow into it. To do is walk into it. I don't have to worry. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to plan ahead. I literally walk by faith and not by sight, and I walk into my destiny every moment of the day. It doesn't even have to take that long. Get 24-hour manifestations. Depending on the harvest, you still have to go through the time. I'm literally a walking talk. The law of seed, time, and harvest. I have to wait it out. A garden walking. But that depends on the kind of manifestation. So seed into it, waiting to reap. That would ultimately end. Certainly produce a harvest. I have control. I have power through submission to God, believing in Christ Jesus. I have that power to execute and produce a harvest.
Crema. 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 Crema.
Extreme focus and invested time is essential to building a process
Crema.
of conception before the level of instinctual control is obtained and maintained.
Crema. Crema.
Free socks.
The restored process of creating decisions are based on a fact of a creative rationale that ultimately bridges the gap between truth and fact. But the separation is simply a demonstration of seeking to be found for the purpose of a triumph or cause. Eternal ideas are based on an exclusive perspective of existence, and the extensions of these thoughts are generated through time, creating a limited illustration of the unlimited. The general concept of power is the nature of infinity, which literally and self-descriptively explains the perfect harmony of accordance. Fact is evidential and truth is constant, and the evidential proof of truth is the constant nature of its very being. It is incorruptible and unbreakable. It is never void and always right, which makes it a fact. Connection and appropriation of an ideal concept is strict at its core, but the combination of elements is what makes the links frequently receptors. It allows the flow of energy to be activated by the solid foundation of the universe that constantly flows and yearns to be definite, according to the perfect perpetual harmony that is naturally spontaneous. Constructive ideas are considered equal in the perpetual sense because the interest in logic figured by distinction attraction causes completed formula, the perfect assimilation of thought that is caused by direct impulses in regard to the assertive behavior of a neutral thought that solves the equal equation. The central focus of defined thought is conclusive to the truth. The prototype is subject to the intricate complexities of the universe, considering the opposing forces that dictate opinion, and the universal notion that reflects a more general perspective on distinct behavior. After the prospect of mental assertion is extended, the express notion of extension becomes self-aware.
Crema.
Free socks.
Set.
The context of its approach is humbly regarded by a subliminal course of action that hopeful substance demands. Conception is an intentional design that is designated by the source to produce an attentive focus on the detailed structural thought. Truth now becomes the driving force behind the peculiar foundation of fact, making it a support system that will constantly prove the consistency of truth. Dedicated completion is in direct contrast to finite precision and based on the constraint that affects perfect balance where there is an underlying notion of truth. A presumption is seemingly accurate, but the need for gratify complex manufactures the equation is in fact incomplete. Contrast is made in order to magnify the essence of constant thought that represents truth by nature remains unbreakable. The difference between gratification and authentication is the intricate nature of choice. The option of choice is strictly independent and motivated by incorruptibility that is rooted and grounded by purpose. The principal thought is always initial and primal, making it universally appealing to the source, that which is also the initiator of
Free socks. Free socks.
The power of intricate thought is simulated from a derived process that predicts absolution and can also determine a definite fact that represents truth. The factual representation is an attribute that withstands the element within the eccentric details of what already exists. Within existence itself, there is a construct of lucrative thoughts that bind together and produce a preconceived notion that ultimately has the potential of becoming historically effective. The transfer of information from one dimension to another is based on an acute angle of connection between the ability to discern truth or just simply project it as fact.
Free socks.
Each one of us come back to that place of peace today. Lord, we believe what we receive. We thank you today as we're worshiping you that you are fighting our battles for us. I ask you, Lord, to open the right doors. No, God would not have allowed it if you couldn't handle it.
Free socks.
Situation is the link that corresponds to the information released from the source, and since the source is infinitely transcended, technicality becomes absolute and remains in the absolution by maintaining its original format. This is simply a discovery of perfection that cannot be perfected, but through display can potentially be discovered and uncovered by the possibility of initial recognition. The mathematical structure of details constructed by substantial essence, that through the awareness of perpetual energy, the location of link communication is found. In order to make contact based on truth, the fact is connection must be obtained through the source. It will resourcefully contact and connect the seeker and the finder.
Try to break something.
Free socks.
Try to break something.
The same spirit that raised Christ from the dead. I can handle this grouchy boss. He's heading home now. Joseph didn't start complaining. He didn't get bitter. His attitude was, I can handle it. Listen, no person can keep you from your destiny. No bad break, no disappointment, no sickness. I've served you all these years. I don't understand it. No, her attitude was, I can handle it. My father, his future looked bright. They just built a beautiful new sanctuary. But through a series of events, he had to leave that church. It was a major disappointment, a major setback. But when one door closes, God will always open up another door. I like that. I'm ready for and equal to anything. He was saying the enemy may hit me with his best shot, but it won't stop me. I'm more than a conqueror. He was falsely accused, beaten with rods, thrown into prison. If anyone, at least in the natural, had a right to be negative, bitter, discouraged, it would have been Paul. But he understood this principle. His attitude was, I can handle it. He's equipped me, empowered me, anointed me, crowned me with favor, put royal blood in my veins, called me to reign in life as a king.
Try to break something.
Free socks. Free socks.
Break something. Try to
Negative.
Something. Or they try to or they try to something.
Negative.
Basically, it's an idea that logical concept illustrates structural thought, and in truth, there's an automatic generation that is activated based on concrete perception. The foundation that presumes logic is subject to the physical senses and standards. An idea is a detailed construct of intricate details that efficiently define meaning and existence in general, based on natural instinct as a limitation, but also substantial description of the infinite idea. Existence itself is an objective formula that infinitely self-generates by constantly reinterpreting itself. Affection is a grounded notion of eternal sentence. It's an act of constant self-recognition and the need to satisfy an extended projection of the source. Constant reinterpretation is an act of consistent truth being displayed that with each fraction prescribes an effect to create a pattern, ultimately preparing a path that perpetually gratifies the journey of self-discovery, that represents innate essence extended from the source, that which is truth. The infinite nature of the source is excess, and through an extension of resources, the source is gratified by implementing routes. In each step, there are factual conditions that further extend the stimulate to engage in the journey, constantly interpreting and seeking that the rally and nearly motivate demonstrates the satiate of existence in general. That not only is it living, but also perfectly self-aware of its living, but also perfectly self-aware of its but also perfectly self-aware of its absolute.
or they try to or they try to something.
Negative. Negative. Negative.
Or they try
Negative.
or they try to something.
Negative. Negative. Negative.
Or they try to
Negative.
When it's all said and done, you'll still be standing. That other house on the sand was washed away. The enemy may hit you with his best shot, but because your house is built on the rock, his best will never be enough. You can handle it. You've been armed with strength. When you have this victor mentality, this attitude of faith, knowing that you're equipped and empowered, all the forces of darkness cannot stop you.
something.
Negative.
Free socks.
Or they something.
Negative. Free socks.